Hi everyone, Guyde here, and today I'm going to talk about what it means to be transgender. Now, transgender people have been in the national spotlight a lot recently. Particularly, it seems like everyone has an opinion on what bathrooms they should or should not be allowed to use, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I just want to start at the beginning. Basically, I found that transgender are some of the most misunderstood people on the planet today, especially online. I've seen a lot of sort of misinformation or misunderstanding in a lot of the forums and discussions I've been having, even in my own comment section. There's some misinformation. So basically, I wanted to put together a quick transgender one-on-one video to go over all the basics and hopefully answer some of the most common questions that you guys may have about being transgender. So, before we start, I just want to note, as usual, two of my most common themes come into play when talking about transgender. The first is, it's complicated. And like sexuality, gender is extremely complicated and runs on a spectrum. And traditionally, we think of gender as being assigned to body parts, and boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. But it's a lot more complicated than that. First of all, gender does not necessarily tie with the body parts. That's the whole, sort of theory behind being transgender. And secondly, gender is more than male and female. Those are two ends on a spectrum, but there's so much space in between those two that there are lots of other possibilities besides just being male and female. But we'll get to gender nonconformity in another video. Let's keep it simple for now. Let's assume that there's male and female for the purpose of this video, and we'll take it from there. The other concept that is so common on this channel and applies here is that it's not what's on the outside that counts, but what's inside that really matters. And that's particularly relevant when talking about transgender people. So I think the confusion starts because we all grew up being taught that boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. But it's not nearly as simple as that. On a most basic level, gender is basically a role that we have as humans have developed. And we tell kids that are born with a penis, you are a boy, and this is what is expected of you as a boy. And people that are born with a vagina, you are a girl, and say these are the things that girls like to do, and these are the things that girls traditionally do. Recently, these sort of roles are becoming a little more flexible, and we are more understanding about when people with penises want to play different roles, play the female roles, and people with vaginas want to play the male roles a little bit more. So it is getting a little more flexible, but we're still a long way off before really breaking free of those roles. So again, for the purpose of this video, let's stick with the traditional roles of a boy and a girl for the simplicity of this discussion. Okay, so to start thinking about transgender, I think it'll be helpful to go back to my earlier concept about how your body is basically a biological machine that you control. So there's you inside, and you control your body, but they're separate. You are not your body. It's your body. It belongs to you. So these are two separate things. And your body is born with a certain set of parts that make up its biological sex. So we say people who are born with penises are called boys, and people who are born with vaginas are called girls. Again, there is some middle ground between those two. There are some combinations where some people are born with both or neither. But again, we'll save that for a separate video. Let's stick with the traditional boy-girl body parts for the purpose of this video. Now, your gender is on the inside. So the gender is determined by you, the person controlling your body. It's how you feel on the inside. It's do you feel like a boy or do you feel like a girl? It's sort of your inner sense of male versus female is what we consider your gender. For most of us, our outer bodies line up with our inner self. And when you have a body that lines up with your inner gender, that's what we call cisgender. So most of you out there are cisgender, if you've never heard that term before. So transgender is when a person's inner gender doesn't line up with their outer body. And this is a pretty difficult concept, I think, for a lot of cisgender people to really grasp. I think it's helpful to try and think about all the things that make you a boy or a girl. And of course your mind first jumps to body parts. And that's basically because that's how we were brought up, being taught. This is what makes you a boy and this is what makes you a girl. But it's a lot deeper than that. Think about all the things that make you a boy or a girl. The way you like to wear your hair, the clothes you like to wear, the stuff you like to do that's either boyish or girlish, how you feel around other boys or girls. If you walk into a room and there's a group of boys and a group of girls, which one do you think you belong in? That sort of feeling. When you're asked if you're a boy or a girl, what does your inner self say? I'm a boy or I'm a girl. And all this stuff, it has nothing to do with body parts, but it still is a big part of being a boy or being a girl. So now take all that stuff that has nothing to do with your body parts and keep that the same. And now imagine tomorrow you wake up in a body that is opposite. And this is how transgender people feel. All of their inner self is one way, but their outer shell is the other way. If this happened to you, if you woke up the next day, you're still the same person. You're still a boy and you're still a girl, but your body parts are different now. And this sort of mismatch is what transgender people have to go through. And like I mentioned earlier, it's what's on the inside that counts, not what's on the outside. And I've talked before about how difficult it can be for LGBT people to come to terms with the fact that their sexuality is different from those around them. But I think it's so much more difficult for a transgender person to come to terms with the fact that their inner self doesn't align with their own body. And it's sort of an inner conflict instead of a conflict with those exterior to them. And for the most part, we don't go around telling young kids, hey, you're straight. We don't force that on them. We assume that they're straight unless they tell us something differently, but it's not something that we tell them that they are or aren't. We do go around telling young kids, you're a boy and you're a girl. And we sort of force kids into these gender roles, and we dress them up as a boy or a girl, and we have certain expectations of what girls like and what boys like, and girls are gonna like dolls and boys are gonna like action figures and all that sort of traditional boy-girl stuff that kids go through. So I think it takes some extra courage for a young trans kid to say, hey, you're wrong, Mom and Dad. I know I look like a boy, but inside I feel like a girl. And I imagine a lot of parents will say, well, no, you're wrong. You have these body parts and that makes you a boy. So it's just sort of an extra sort of barrier they need to go through to convince other people that they need to look past what's on the outside. And the outside is not what counts, and inside is how they feel. Inside I feel like a girl, regardless of how I look on the outside. And this is a difficult realization for a young trans kid to come to terms with, not only internally, but then have to try and explain it and convince adults that the adult is wrong and the kid is right about who they are inside. And this just leads to a lot of intense bullying of trans kids. And they're really one of the most bullied groups of people on the planet today. And it also makes transgendered adults the targets of discrimination and attacks. And with so much of society is basically stacked against them, a recent survey has found that up to 41% of the transgender community have attempted suicide. 41%. That's almost half of an entire group of people have thought about ending their lives because it's so difficult to get through this process of going through and coming out as transgender. And it's not their fault. It's our fault. It's our fault for making them feel different, for making them feel like they were born wrong. They're not born wrong. These are just made up roles that we made up a long time ago, and we're trying to fit people into them, and sometimes people don't fit. And this is why this transgendered bathroom is such a hot topic lately. Basically, trans kids are asking for the right to use the bathroom of their gender identity, not the gender of their body. And before he left office, President Obama issued guidance to all public schools saying that yes, you have to allow transgendered kids to use the bathroom that they're most comfortable with, and not base it on the parts that they're born with. But then we have our President Trump, who basically rescinded that guidance and basically said that no, schools do not have to allow trans kids to use the bathroom that they want to. And this is just adding to the already overwhelming anxiety that trans kids may feel, and making them feel more different from those around them. And it needs to stop. Opponents of the guidance say that it can be used by predators to say, go in a little girl's room and be creepy about it. But it's not the transgender community that's being predators and being creepy about it. If you want to find a predator that's being creepy about it, look no further than our very own President Trump, who in an interview with Howard Stern admits that he would go and barge into the girls' changing rooms at these beauty pageants that he used to run because he could. Now that is creepy, and that is predator-like, and that is what we should be discussing, not these poor trans kids who are just trying to find a comfortable place to go to the bathroom. Anyway, so once a transgender person has come to terms with the fact that they are transgender and they were born with a mismatch of their body and their gender, then they have the option to elect to start making changes to their outward appearance to match how they feel inside. Now this typically starts with simple things like changing your haircut and starting to wear different clothes, but it also starts impacting how they relate to the people around them. So they may pick a different name that they want their friends and family to call them. They'll ask to switch pronouns. So instead of calling me she and her, I would prefer it if you call me he and him when referring to me. And so this process of beginning to make changes to your outward appearance to match your inner gender is what they call transitioning. And clothes and hair and names are the very surface of it. Once you get beyond that, then we start talking about medical changes that you can make to your body. The first of these is hormone therapy. So female bodies are given the male hormone testosterone to basically try and force that body to be a bit more male. So it means a reduction in the breast size, an increase in muscle mass, an increase in body hair, and a lowering of the voice. And this helps trans males feel more boyish, because on the outside they look more boyish, so people start reacting to them as a boy. And the reverse is true for male bodies. So male bodies start taking the hormone estrogen, which again, it starts increasing their breast size. It reduces their facial and body hair, and maybe increase the pitch of their voice. And again, helps them feel more female, because their bodies are starting to act a little bit more female than they used to. So after hormone therapy, a transgender person can elect to have what they call gender reassignment surgery. And there's any number of surgeries that a transgender person can have. The most common is either a breast reduction or breast implant, depending on which direction they're going. But there are some additional surgeries that a transgender person can have to try and transform their lower genitals to more match with their internal gender. These surgeries are invasive, very complex, and can be very expensive, and are not covered by a lot of insurance companies. So a lot of times transgender people don't have a choice. They simply can't afford or can't go through the process medically to get the rest of their genitals basically changed to match their inner person. But again, it's important to remember that it's not what's on the outside that counts. It's what's on the inside that's important. So body parts are body parts, and body parts can change if the situation is right. But even if they don't change, it doesn't change who the person is on the inside. So in the end, a transgender person can make a few changes to their body and their outward appearance, or they can go full-blown and go all the way and try and make as many changes as they can. Regardless of how many changes they make, it doesn't really impact about whether they are a male or a female, because again, it's what's inside that counts. So if a transgender person says that they are a male, then they are a male. And we should treat them as a male, regardless of what body parts they have, what body parts they used to have, and what body parts they may have in the future. It's really that inside, that internal gender that really matters. I also think it's important to note that when transgender people are able to transition and begin living their life of the gender they feel on the inside, there's a common sense of joy and relief that they're finally able to be themselves and live their life as who they are. This is that same sense of joy and relief that I mentioned in my coming out video that gay people feel when they're able to live their lives as gay people, and the same sense of being able to be themselves that I mentioned is a core need of true happiness, is the need to be able to be yourself. And once transgender people are able to transition and live their life as how they feel on the inside, then they are able to do that. So before I finish up, I do also want to talk a little bit about what transgender is not, because there's some confusion there as well. Well, first off, gender identity is not the same as sexual identity. They are independent of each other. So you can have a trans male that is attracted to females and considers himself straight. You can have a trans male that is attracted to males and considers himself gay. And the same is true of females being, straight or a lesbian. There's also bisexual transgender people. So that there's the full spectrum exists within this community, and again, they're not dependent on each other, and they're not the same thing. But I think what is important to remember when thinking about sexuality and gender is it's the internal gender when you're talking about relationships. So if there is a trans male who is in a relationship with a male, and that is a homosexual relationship, even if that transgender person still has a vagina, it's still a homosexual, it's a gay relationship if he is in a relationship with another male, because it's what's inside that counts, not what's on the outside. Remember, it's complicated, and you may not understand it, but this is just how it is. Transgender people should also not be confused with transvestites. So a transvestite is basically a cisgender person, so a person who doesn't feel like they are a different gender, but they like to wear the clothing of the opposite gender. So, for example, Eddie Izzard is one of my favorite transvestites. He's a comedian. He is a straight man who is a male, who was born with male parts, but he likes to wear women's clothing. And he considers himself an executive transvestite. I will let him explain that in his own words. I'll include a video for you here to let him explain it. And while we're talking about changing clothing, transgender people should also not be confused with drag queens, which are gay men who dress up as women with makeup and wigs and typically take on a whole nother different drag persona that they go out and present to the world when they're in drag. I will definitely be getting to drag in one of my later videos. I'm really excited for that one. It's a world I'm not very familiar with, but I'm excited to get to know. So stay tuned for that. And finally, transgender people are not mentally ill. Yes, it's true that there is a higher rate of depression, anxiety, and suicide amongst transgender people, but that's not an internal problem, that's an external problem. That's because society puts all this pressure on them to conform to this gender role that they were assigned at birth when they feel that they are not that gender. So it's not a mental illness that needs to be cured. So we talked about a lot today. This is going to be a long video. I'm sure I didn't cover all of the questions you may have, so let me know if there are any other questions about being transgender. Don't forget to like this video if you thought it was helpful, and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with my upcoming topics. If you have any other questions besides from being transgender, you can leave them in any of my comment sections below, or you can send me an email to thegayguide@gmail.com. But in the meantime, get out there and be who you needed growing up.